Okay, these are some of the ways you get the answers to the factor completely homework. So in order to do this, first look for your greatest common factor. Always look for that first. And in this case, the greatest common factor is 2. So I'm going to pull 2 outside of the parentheses, divide everything by 2, and in the parentheses, I'll be left with r squared. Divide this by 2, and I get negative 11r. Divide this by 2, and I get positive 30. But I'm not done factoring completely because this can be factored. The first term is r squared, so I need to think of ways that I can get r squared. And the constant term is positive 30. I need to think of ways that I can get positive 30. Since this is a positive number, I know that my two factors of 30 are going to have the same sign. And since the middle term is negative, that means they're both going to be negative. So what I'm going to end up doing is factor this out. Don't forget the factor of 2 to bring it down when you're all done. So in order to get r squared, I have to have r times r. So that's the first thing in each set of parentheses. And they have the same sign, and that sign is going to be negative. So I'm going to have r minus something, r minus something. So which two negative numbers multiply to give us positive 30, but add to negative 11? I just go through, I start at 1. Negative 1 times negative 30. But those add to negative 31, not negative 11. Negative 2 times negative 15, but those add to negative 17, not negative 11. Then I'll go to 3 next, 1, 2, and then negative 3 times negative 10, but those add to negative 13. Negative 4 is not a factor of 30, so I don't try it, but negative 5 is. So negative 5 times negative 6 is positive 30, and those work because when you add negative 5 and negative 6, you get negative 11. So it's going to be r minus 5 and r minus 6, and that's the final answer to number 1. For number 2, let me erase all of this. For number 2, the greatest common factor is 3. So I'm going to pull 3 outside of the parentheses. And if I divide all 3 terms by 3, I'll get what's in the parentheses here. When you divide this by 3, you get x squared. Divide positive 30x by 3, and you get plus 10x. Divide 63 by 3, and you get positive 21. I want to see if I can factor this, and I can. So I need to set up my parentheses for factoring this trinomial. Don't forget my factor of 3. And now I want to find two positive numbers because my last term is positive. They're going to have the same sign, and that sign is going to be positive. I know the only way to get x squared is if I have x as the first term in each set of parentheses. And I need to get a positive 21 here. What are my factors of 21? There's only 2 possible combinations. That's 1 and 21. Or 2 is not a divisible, so 3 times 7, and I think that's it. Now, 3 times 7 is the one that I'm looking for because when you add 3 and 7, you do get 10 right here. So I'm going to have x plus 3 and x plus 7. Don't forget that all gets multiplied by 3. And there is number 2 factored completely. Okay, let's do the next 2 problems in the factor completely homework. Number 3 is 2x squared minus 32. And as always look for the greatest common factor first. That's going to be 2. So that means I'm going to pull 2 outside the parentheses, and inside the parentheses, I'm going to have 2 terms, and both of those terms are going to be these 2 divided by the greatest common factor 2. Divide this by 2, and I get x squared. Divide negative 32 by 2, and I get negative 16. And we're not completely done because this is actually the difference of 2 perfect squares. Remember, the difference of 2 perfect squares is written as something squared minus something else squared. Well, a in this case is x. And what got squared to give us 16 is b. 16 is 4 squared. So this is what I have here. So remember that a squared minus b squared is really a plus b times a minus b. So I'm going to rewrite this as x plus 4 times x minus 4. But don't forget that there's a factor of 2 in front of it. So I'm going to have 2 times x plus 4 times x minus 4. And that's what I get when I'm all done with this problem. Let me get rid of this. It looks a little confusing with that up there. So I end up with 2 times x plus 4 times x minus 4. This next problem, number 4, does not have a greatest common factor, so I have to skip that step. And then I say, well, is it 2, 3, or 4 terms? And it's 4 terms. So that means I'm going to try to factor by grouping, and this one can be factored by grouping. So I'm going to group these 2 terms together, and I'm going to group these 2 terms together. For these 2 terms, the greatest common factor is x squared. I know that because both of them have x, and the lowest exponent is 2. So I'm going to pull x squared outside of the parentheses, and inside the parentheses divide each of these 2 terms by x squared. X cubed divided by x squared is really just this, x cubed divided by x squared. This cancels and this cancels, so I'm left with x over 1, which is just x. When you divide x squared by x squared, you get 1, because anything divided by itself is just 1, and in this case it's positive 1. Now I look to my second 2 terms, and I notice that the greatest common factor here is negative 4. So I need to put not just 4, but I need a minus 4 here for negative 4. Inside the parentheses, I should have the same thing here that I have here. And let's just check. Is 4 times x, negative 4 times x, negative 4x? And it is. Is negative 4 times positive 1 going to give me negative 4? And it does. So that means when I'm all done, I'm left with x plus 1 getting multiplied by x squared and negative 4. So I put those together in one set of parentheses. But you may have noticed that this is also the difference of 2 squares. So I can rewrite this, right? The difference of 2 squares can be written as a plus b in parentheses times a minus b. So I need to figure out what a and b are. A is what got squared to give us this, it's x. B is what's squared to give me the last term. What got squared to give me 4? That's 2. So that means I'm going to rewrite this, x squared minus 4, as x plus 2 times x minus 2. But I'm not done, because this x plus 2 times, this is my x plus 2 times x minus 2. That's also getting multiplied by x plus 1. So I need that additional factor. So when I'm all done with this one, I have 3 binomials getting multiplied together that multiply and give a product of this. Okay, let's do the very last problem in the homework. First thing we always want to do is look for the greatest common factor. And I can see that both of these terms have coefficients that are divisible by 4. So I pull that out first. But both terms also have a in them. So I know a is going to be part of my greatest coefficient also. A to what exponent? Well, it's going to be the smallest exponent of the 2. And in this case, it's 2. So 4a squared is my greatest common factor, which means that's going to go outside the parentheses. To get what's inside the parentheses, divide each one of these 2 terms by 4a squared. So let's divide 36a to the 4th. That's what a to the 4th means. Let's divide it by 4a squared. And a over a is just 1. So these sets of a over a cancel, and I'm left with 36a times a over 4. But 36 over 4 is just 9. So I'll end up with 9 times a, or 9a squared. And negative 4a squared divided by positive 4a squared is just going to be negative 1. My cat's wanting to go out, sorry. I don't know if you noticed it, but this is also the difference of 2 perfect squares. So I'm going to have a squared minus b squared. And I have to figure out what got multiplied. I know I'm going to break this up into 2 sets of parentheses. What got multiplied by itself to give me 9a squared? Well, 3 times 3 would give me the 9. And a times a would give me a squared. So 3a times 3a will give me the 9a squared. Remember, when you do the difference of 2 squares, one's going to have a plus sign in between and one's going to have a minus sign in between. So I'm going to have a plus and a minus. What got multiplied by itself to give me 1? Well, that's 1. 1 times itself is 1. So when I multiply these two binomials together, I get 9a squared minus 1, but not this. So 9a squared minus 1, which is really this, has to get multiplied by 4a squared. So don't forget that factor when we're all done. So this is your answer to number 5.